I'm so delighted to have Ambassador David Friedman with us today on our Facebook social network platform. Jerusalem Prayer Team members, I know you are very excited to have David. He's got an amazing book that he's going to be talking about. And I want to say this in advance, even before he starts. I don't want you to buy a copy. I don't want you to buy one. I want you to buy 2, 5, or 10. And I want you to give them to your pastor, to your friends, for Christmas gifts. It's this book. I read it twice this weekend. And as you know, I've written 113 books and I'm #1 New York Times bestseller. So I don't do this. I don't promote books like this. So you're going to be very excited about this. I am. So David, thank you so much. And let me be, hey, you begin.
Well, Mike, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been far too long that we got together on your on this platform. You know, we've known each other a long time, and you've been such a dear friend of mine, of the state of Israel, of the Trump administration, that you know, that's done so much for Israel. So I'm glad we finally got a chance to do this.
Well, we had 4 amazing years together, didn't we?
Oh, we did. We did things that I don't think anybody ever expected would happen, and you were right there. You know, when the embassy was moved to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv, which I think continues to be, if not the single most significant achievement by the president, certainly in the top 5. To me, it's of course #1 because I led that. But you know, you were there. You hosted a huge congressional delegation, a State Department delegation. You made us feel so comfortable and warm. And of course, you were behind those huge banners all around Jerusalem, you know, about how Trump is a friend of Zion. So, you know, we're very grateful for all the support you've given us over such a long period of time.
Well, it's wonderful, David. I've been working with the state of Israel since Menachem Begin for 50 years, and there's never been an ambassador in Israel that accomplished what you've accomplished. And the whole nation knows it. The whole nation knows it. So you are God's instrument in the nation to change the destiny of that nation more than it's ever been changed. So all glory goes to the Lord. I know you're a man of faith. Well, we want to talk about your book, The One Jewish State, and I think I'd like to begin by asking you why you titled the book that.
Well, the title to me is very important. I thought long and hard about the title, and each word really is very much infused with meaning. You know, one, there's only one Jewish state anywhere in the world. You know, there's 40 Muslim countries, there's countless other countries of other faiths. One Jewish state, you know, in land about the same size as New Jersey, with the Jewish people living there, people that have a better claim to their land than any people anywhere in the world. There's no one with a claim, you know, that goes back 3,500 years to the most, you know, holy, most revered, most respected text ever written. Of course, I'm speaking about the Bible, and that's the title deed, if you will, to the Jewish people, to the land of Israel. So that's the one. Jewish is that, you know, the entirety of Jewish history flows through this land, all of biblical history. You go to Israel, you go to especially in Judea and Samaria, you walk the land, you know, walked by the prophets, walked by Joshua, walked by all the great heroes of Israel, walked by Jesus, of course, incredible importance to the Christian faith. And then the word state, you know, is just a reminder that Israel is, you know, is a sovereign nation. It's a state. It's got a powerful army. It's got responsibility for all of its inhabitants, but it's got an opportunity as well to be the sovereign over its biblical homeland, which is ultimately the goal of this book, that Israel should become sovereign over all its biblical homeland. Right now, it's not, unfortunately. People may not understand that. As you read the book, you'll understand some of the most holy places to Jews and Christians, whether it's Hebron or Shiloh or Bethel or Jerusalem or Bethlehem. These are places where the world, even unfortunately the Biden administration, does not consider that Israel has the right to be sovereign over this territory. This book is the thesis, is the case for why Israel should be, both from a faith perspective and just from a realpolitik, a national security, and economic human rights perspective as well.
Now, the myth that has been propagated, even with the State Department presently, is that there's a legitimate reason to have a Palestinian state. Can you please talk about Palestinians and their culture, their history, and their what right do they have to have a state?
Well, first of all, let's take a step back and say this: Palestinians have never been recognized as a people until Yasser Arafat coined this phrase in the 1960s, and he created the brand, if you will, solely as a means to destroy Israel. But Palestine was a territory going back to, the period of the Romans. It was created in the context of the Roman destruction of Judea, right? Judea is why we're called Jews. And they called it Palestine because they wanted to put an exclamation point in their humiliation of the Jewish people. So they named it after the Philistines, who had been, the rival to the Jews, those who fought against the Jews in biblical times. But Palestine was never a country. It was never, there was never the notion of an indigenous people to Palestine. And for many years, until 1948, there were Palestinian Arabs and there were Palestinian Jews. Palestine had nothing specific, no specific connotation to Arabs. Now, Yasser Arafat came along in 1967 after the creation of the State of Israel, right? So Israel was no longer considering itself Palestinian because they created Palestine, they created Israel from Palestine. And he said, I'm going to be the Palestinian from now on. And he created this movement, and it has only been a movement to destroy Israel. It's never been a movement to live side by side with Israel. And look, I've been debating this for years and years, and I made this point many times when I was the ambassador to Israel, and people argued with me. After October 7th, I think the argument is now foreclosed. I mean, I think that is the final nail in the coffin on the idea of a Palestinian state. Why? Because the Palestinians had a state. They had Gaza, right? They had the entirety of the Gaza Strip, along with the beautiful beachfront, western-facing Mediterranean beachfront. You can see the sunset at night, just like Tel Aviv. Hasn't been, a Jew living there since 2005. Hasn't been an Israeli soldier with boots on the ground there since after October 7th. And they had this territory to themselves. And what did they do? They elected Hamas to be their governing body, a terrorist organization. And then they got lots and lots of money. They got it from the EU. They got it from the UN. They got it, unfortunately, from the United States. Many administrations, other than the Trump administration, funded Hamas in Gaza through UNRWA. And what did Hamas do with all the money? Right? Did they build schools? Did they build, healthcare institutions? Did they try to create commerce? Did they build even a single hotel along the Mediterranean to encourage tourism in this beautiful area? No, they took all the money and they used it to build terror tunnels, the largest network of terror tunnels in the world, and to build weapons of mass destruction, the rockets that they shot indiscriminately at civilian locations in Israel. So that's it. The Palestinian state experiment was tried, and it failed. And there's no way in the world after that horrific attack on October 7th, the rape, the torture, the kidnapping, the beheading, the burning of children, there's no way in the world that we're going to try that experiment again. And I should also point out that more than 80% of Palestinians living in Judea and Samaria, living in the West Bank, celebrated the atrocities committed by Hamas. So we have to just rid ourselves of this poison, this poisonous notion of a Palestinian state. I sort of feel, and again, we're both people who are not just people of faith, but with, I think, a deep understanding of biblical prophecy. I look at October 7th, and what I say to myself is, God is saying to us, how many more times do I need to tell you, do not give away the land that I promised to your forefathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Don't make me demonstrate this again. And I hope October 7th was the last time we'll have to learn this painful lesson.
Wow. You reminded me of a meeting I had. I confronted Arafat on the 43rd General Assembly of the United Nations in Geneva. And he stood up and he said, I denounce terror. And the whole PLO executive committee were in the room. It was a private meeting. I got in on the third row. And I stood up, and I wasn't invited to stand up. I stood up and I said, I held up the PLO covenant. I said, well, then denounce this that calls for the destruction of the state of Israel. He screamed, shut up, shut up, shut up. What must I make to do to make you shut up? Striptease for you? It would be absurd. Mm-hmm. Well, that's exactly right. That's what he wanted, the destruction of the state. I want to tell our Jerusalem prayer teams one other thing. In early 72, I met with the head of the Christian Lebanese army, Saad Haddad. And I said to him, I heard something about land for peace. It was 72. What does it mean? Oh, he said, I'll set up a meeting with the architect of it. I said, what? Yes. Let me call him. He called him. He said, Mike, go to the Hilton Hotel in Beirut Thursday to the bar and meet with the architect of Land for Peace. Don't ask him for his name. Just ask for the Dark Prince. I go. He's like a playboy. He's got a gold chain on. He tells me I married a beauty queen. The CIA paid for my honeymoon to Disney World and to Hawaii. And I said, really? Who? He said, Herbert Walker Bush. He was over Langley at the time. I'm listening to this guy and I'm thinking, what the heck is he talking about? I said, what's Land for Peace? He said, oh, it's easy. He said, we give you peace. I said, what do you mean? He said, we hijacked your hostages. We attacked your installations. We stopped. We gave you peace. I'm giving you peace. I'm protecting your diplomats in Lebanon. I'm giving you peace. And you're going to give us land. That's Land for Peace. I said, whose land? Israel's land. It's Land for Peace. We give you peace. You give us land. I did not know who the man was until I left, until I picked up a newspaper later. On the front page was the man, the head of the Munich massacre. Yeah. The CIA was protecting him. Mossad was trying to kill him, the architect of Land for Peace. I want to talk about the State Department, and they're talking about Judea and Samaria as the West Bank. Can you explain the significance of Judea and Samaria in light of your book?
Well, Judea and Samaria is the heart of biblical Israel. And I even made a film about it with Mike Pompeo called Route 60, the Biblical Highway. Route 60 is the north-south artery that bisects Judea and Samaria. And, it starts in Nazareth, which of course is very holy to the Christian faith. It's where Jesus grew up. And then it enters what's referred to as the West Bank, or Judea and Samaria. And, places like Shlem, it's referred to Nablus by the Palestinians. This is where Abraham came when he received the calling from God to enter the land of Canaan, which became the land of Israel. That's Shlem. This is also where the bones of Jacob were restored, to the land of Israel after his bones were reinterred out of Egypt during the Exodus and buried in Shlem. Then you have the altar of Joshua, where Joshua brings the Jewish people across the Jordan River, and he builds the altar as God commanded him. Then you have Shiloh, or Shiloh in Hebrew, where the tabernacle rested for 369 years. This was the Jerusalem before there was Jerusalem. It's where Samuel the prophet was born, where Hannah taught the world how to pray, where she prayed so liturgically for a child. Then Bethel, where Jacob, sat under a rock and saw the vision of angels going up and down a ladder to heaven, to Jerusalem, which we all know how significant Holy Jerusalem is to Jews and Christians alike, to Bethlehem, where Jesus was born, to the tomb of Rachel, where Rachel was buried, where people come to this day to pray for, women who can't have children come to Rachel's tomb to pray for a child, because Rachel, of course, died in childbirth along the road when she was giving birth to Benjamin, to Hebron, which Abraham purchased in order to find the burial place for his wife Sarah, and then he was buried there as well as Isaac and Jacob and Rebekah and Leah, all the way down to Beersheba. So this is the Bible, right? This is where the Bible took place. Now, other than Nazareth in the north and Beersheba in the south, all these places that I mentioned are places where the world considers them to be illegally occupied by Israel. Israel has no right to be there. Until Mike Pompeo and I came along, and Mike wrote what's referred to as the Pompeo Doctrine, after a lot of legal analysis, where we concluded that their legal analysis is wrong, that the Jewish people have every right to live in their biblical homeland. And of course, God, forget about the Pompeo Doctrine. I mean, God himself, in the Bible made it very clear that this would be the land of the Jewish people. He made that covenant to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And of course, the prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel all prophesied that the Jews would return to this land. So this is Israel. This is biblical Israel. And right now, other than perhaps you and me and and a bunch of Republicans in government and the Israelis themselves believe that Israel has the right to be there. And this book is designed, to present not just as a matter of faith, but also as a matter of fact, the entitlement, the rights of the Jewish people to live there, and why. And this is important. Whether you care about the Jews, or you care about the Palestinians, or you care about both of them, or you care about regional stability, or you care about human rights, it is the best outcome for Jews and Palestinians alike. It is the best outcome for Muslims, Christians, Druze, Jews, for everyone. So the book is a story of faith, but it's also a story of old-fashioned kind of geopolitics. And I think it ends with the conclusion that Mike Pompeo wrote in the foreword to my book. Why should anybody be surprised that following God's will actually yield the best outcome for all the inhabitants of this land?
Annexation. There's a lot of talk about annexation. Can you address this issue?
Sure. Well, whenever anybody talks about Israel, extending its sovereignty to Judea and Samaria, they say, well, that's annexation. And annexation is kind of a dirty word in international law. The UN, prohibits annexation of territory. But what is annexation? Annexation is when country A takes over country B, takes over territory in country B, where the only basis upon which it's taking over country B is a military victory, where it conquered the land and now it's taking it over. And the UN says, look, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't conquer land and take it over. It's not what happened here. Israel doesn't have a right to Judea and Samaria because of its conquest. Israel has a right to Judea and Samaria because, as a matter of international law, as a matter of biblical law, as a matter of its lengthy history in this territory, it has the right to be there. Now, don't listen to me. Listen to the Undersecretary of State. His name was Eugene Rostow. He represented the United States in the aftermath of the Six-Day War, when Israel regained control of Judea and Samaria. He went on to become the dean of the Yale Law School. His legal opinion is that Israel has the best rights, in fact, the only rights, legal rights under international law, to Judea and Samaria. And let's remember, who did Israel in 1967 regain control of Judea and Samaria from? They got control of it from Jordan, not from some state called Palestine, which has never existed. It got it back from Jordan, which nobody recognized Jordan's rights to that territory. And in fact, when Jordan made peace with Israel in 1995, it renounced its claim to Judea and Samaria. So when Israel took over Judea and Samaria, they regained control from parties that had no rights to it in the first place, that everybody recognizes. So this is not annexation. Again, annexation is a military conquest. This is not a military conquest. This is as if you stole my bicycle, okay, and I went into your garage and took it back, right? That's what this is, okay? It's my bicycle, not yours. I went and took it back. That's what happened here.
You mentioned Jordan. Isn't Jordan a Palestinian state? I mean,
yes. And it's so, and I think this is another. Thank you for bringing that up, because what happened was there was this area called Palestine, and it didn't even have any borders. And then after World War I, when the Ottoman Empire gave up its rights to Palestine, so the British were given a mandate to be the trustees over Palestine, and then they had to decide what the borders were, because it had never been decided. It was never relevant because it was never a country. So they negotiated those borders mostly with the Saudis in the south and with the French in the north. The French were, controlling Syria and Lebanon, and the Saudis were in the south. So they negotiated the boundaries of Palestine. Okay, and then they said, wait a minute, and they took it pursuant to a mandate, which is called the San Remo Declaration, which basically the mandate was, you, the Brits, are supposed to hold this in order to create a national homeland for the Jewish people. That's what Palestine was earmarked for in this League of Nations mandate. What did the British do? They said, it's too much for the Jews. They took 72% of it, 72% of it, they peeled it off, and they created the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, and they say, and which was, of course, 72% of mandatory Palestine. And they imposed the leader there, who was Saudi by nature, a Hashemite king. But Jordan is a Palestinian state in two respects. Number one, it was created out of the land called Palestine, 72% of it. And second of all, its population is almost entirely Palestinian. So that's the Palestinian state. There already exists a Palestinian state. What Israel is left with is 28% of the land that was earmarked for the Jewish people pursuant to the League of Nations mandate. So you're absolutely right. There already is a Palestinian state. It's called Jordan.
And isn't the Queen Palestinian?
The Queen is Palestinian. Yes, she is. As are
Now
most.
talk about the Arabs living in Israel. You know, what kind of lifestyle do they have? Are they have influence in Israel? I think it's important for people to
Yeah.
understand Israel's relationship to Israeli Arabs.
Yes, thank you. It's a very, very important point, and it's I think the point that makes the non-theological case, if you will, why Israel should have sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. 20% of Israel today is Arab. 20%. Israel has 4 or 5 elite universities. More than 20% of the students in those elite universities are Arab. Christian Arabs have the highest standard of living per capita of any people within Israel, including the Jews. And the Arabs in Israel have achieved the highest levels of government. They're citizens of the country. They have representation. They have about 12 seats, about 10% of the seats in the Knesset. They've achieved, the highest levels of business, commerce, law. A dear friend of mine was formerly, just recently, the chairman of the Bank Leumi, the largest bank in Israel. He's a Arab citizen, a Muslim. Israel has done wonderful work. They don't get enough credit for it. Israel's done wonderful work in empowering its Arab minority, and that's why when you think about, who should have sovereignty over Judea and Samaria, which has a large Arab population, who should have sovereignty over it? Only Israel, because only Israel is a democracy with a history of empowering its Arab Muslim minority.
Any attempt by Israeli Arabs to move to Gaza or Ramallah?
When I was ambassador, I had heard that there were some communities in the north, Arab communities that were that felt that they were not treated as well as they could be. I went up there. I met with Israeli Arab citizens in the north, and I just said to them, sort of tongue in cheek, I said, look, there's some talk about a Palestinian state. President Trump's pretty flexible. Should he redraw the map so that maybe you would be more comfortable living in a Palestinian state if that's the way this process goes? And they looked at me like I had 2 heads. I said, "Are you crazy? The last thing we want to do is to live under Palestinian rule. Listen, I mean, we got our issues, but make no mistake, we want to live under Israeli sovereignty. Israel is the only country in this region which knows how to treat its citizens fairly."
You have been not only the ambassador to the state of Israel, but you have been the closest friend of evangelical Christians. Can you talk about the importance of evangelical Christians to the state of Israel?
Well, sure. First of all, they are Israel's largest group of friends, maybe Israel's most important friends. I don't like to do too much damage to my own faith. I mean, but obviously we're small in number, and I don't, unfortunately, like in America, there's maybe 5 or 6 million Jews. Less than a third of us really, consider Israel to be, a top 3 issue. Whereas evangelicals, they certainly do. They consider the safety and security of the state of Israel to be one of the most important issues for them politically. So they're enormously important, but they're more important in I think, a more fundamental way. So I'm an observant Jew, and what I have in common with evangelical Christians is that we both believe in the texts of the holy works. Again, my texts end with the Old Testament. Evangelical Christians go further into the New Testament, but either way, we're faithful to text, which is so important because we believe this is the inspired word of God, the Bible.
Mm.
We believe these words are immutable. We believe that they're non-negotiable, and so when people ask me to state what's the best claim of the Jewish people to the land of Israel, I can make there's 4 or 5 arguments that you can make. Some of them are historical, some of them are legal, but my first point is always biblical. Because to me, I mean, what's a more powerful argument than the word of God that promised this land to the Jewish people over and over again, in his covenants to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that's where we're deeply of one mind with evangelical Christians. We believe in the holiness and the immutability of the text, the holy text. That's why we're here. We're not making it up as we go along. We're not, sticking our finger in the air and seeing which way the wind is blowing. We believe that the word of God is the word of God, and we need to follow it. And that is something which I think, Zionists, whether they're Christian or Jewish, I think share in common, and I think it's the fundamental point that we share in common. That's the foundations of our faith.
Can you talk about the end game in solving the Palestinian dilemma in relationship to Israel?
So look, I believe that Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, well, first of all, understand when to try to get a real poll done, very hard, because there's no human rights there. There's no ability to speak freely. Anyone who speaks in ways that are critical of the Palestinian Authority can be jailed, can be tortured. So, it's a very repressed group. But when I speak to some of them privately, what they tell me is, look, we want what everybody else wants. Get us a better school, get us a better curriculum for our kids, get us a decent hospital so that we don't have to, travel to Jerusalem and go through checkpoints if we have a heart attack. Get us a way to take our manufactured goods out to a port in Haifa or Ashdod where we can sell to the world, and make some money. Get us things that make sense for a modern society. We want to embrace modernity. We're not religious fanatics. We just want to live here in peace, just like our brethren do, who are Israeli Arab citizens. And we have no confidence. They'll tell me we have no confidence in the ability of the Palestinian Authority to govern in any way other than that is brutal and corrupt. And so I think that what we need a kind of a triangle here. The way I look at this, we need Israel kind of to be willing, on the basis of a national consensus, to assert its sovereignty over all the occupants, all the those who inhabit Judea and Samaria, including a couple of million Arabs. Okay, they need to be willing to do that. They need to get help because it's a big lift. Okay, we're talking about being responsible for kind of healthcare and welfare and things like that. It's a big lift. We need to convince our partners, the Abraham Accords partners, and the Saudis in the Gulf. If you really care about the Palestinians, if you care about them, we're not talking about doing lip service. We're not talking about paying blood money to the leadership to keep the streets to keep your streets from going crazy. But if you really care about them, help Israel empower the Palestinian minority, just like an Arab minority inside the Green Line. Help Israel do that. And then we got to get the United States to support this. And with that triangle, we think we can go to the Palestinian people and say, you know what? Your misery is over. Your nightmare is over. Okay, you're going to end up being part of a country that actually works, a democratic country, a country where you may not have the right to vote in a national election because the right of collective national self-determination in Israel has to be a way that preserves the one Jewish state. There has to always be one Jewish state. But you'll have autonomy, you'll have resources, you'll have the ability to control your zoning and your building, and Israel will come in and help you develop a world-class economy. What does that do? It gives Israel the tools that it's never had before. Right now, in this no man's land, right, of Judea and Samaria, Israel comes in, in places like Jenin and Ramallah and Tulkarm, that are hotbeds of terrorism, and it comes in with its military, but it has nothing to offer positive. It can arrest and detain and jail the terrorists. But what can it do for the people that don't want to be terrorists? It doesn't have the tools. So if Israel can come now and say, look, we have sticks, we have carrots. If you guys want to kill us, we're going to kill you first. But if you don't want to kill us, if you want to live with us in peace, we now are empowered as the sovereign over this nation to provide you with resources and assets and benefits that you could have only dreamed of before. That'll be provided by a government that's democratically elected that you can have confidence in. That to me is a game changer compared to where things are now.
Well, I want to say something to you Palestinians that are watching, especially you in America. Why did you come to America? There's hundreds of thousands of you. You didn't come here because you wanted to vote. You come here because you wanted prosperity, you wanted peace, you wanted security, you wanted democracy. You got it all here, and you're living a very happy life. This is exactly what Ambassador Friedman wants for the Palestinians in that region. It's a wonderful thing. David, you talk about in your book, you mentioned Puerto Rico
Yep.
and this Puerto Rican model. I think it's a phenomenal revelation to our viewers.
Sure. Well, the idea is that how could you provide different voting rights to Palestinians in Judea and Samaria relative to Israeli citizens, including Arab citizens who are already citizens. So first of all, none of this touches any of the voting rights of Arab citizens who already have them. So it's nothing, no rights are being taken away. But my point, first of all, is look, Israel's coming in and assuming, the responsibility for the welfare of people that historically have wanted to kill them. I mean, so, you have to be a little bit careful in the governance to make sure the governance doesn't go haywire and you swap a demographic risk for a security risk. But having said that, this idea that it's somehow immoral or illegal to provide different voting rights, well, America does that. America is the sovereign of Puerto Rico, and people that live in Puerto Rico do not vote in our national elections. America is also sovereign over Guam and American Samoa and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Also, they don't vote in a national election. So my point about governance is, look, let's, don't, people should not start screaming about, everybody's entitled to the same voting rights. It could be negotiated, it could be worked through. I mean, it's a short book, so you could spend 200 pages with with lawyers writing about different ways to govern. But I also point out, Mike, governance is negotiated to achieve certain goals. Here's a perfect example. Apart from Puerto Rico, if you live in Montana, right, your population is roughly 1/1000th of the population of the United States, right? But if you live in Montana, you get to choose 1/50th of the United States Senate, right? Does that make sense? Is that fair? Is that democracy? These things get negotiated. They get worked out. I mean, there are different goals. Why? I mean, the people that lived in Montana, they said, look, we don't want to get, we're a small population, a big landmass. We don't want to get lost in the shuffle. We want to be heard. We understand that in the House, we're going to be a tiny minority. This is what we want out of the Senate. These things that get negotiated, it's not perfect. It's like a hot dog, it tastes good, but you gotta make it first. And it doesn't always look at being made. We can work this thing out in ways that everyone feels that they're part of the country, that they're empowered. If it's not the Puerto Rican model, there'll be another model that we can use. I mean, my point about Puerto Rico is just saying, look, don't get too hung up about, one person, one vote. We don't even do that in the United States. And we'll work it out. And if people want to work this out and make their lives massively better and bring peace to this region, we'll work out the governance as well.
David, you played a major role in the Abraham Accords. What's the future of the Abraham Accords under Donald Trump?
I think they're quite promising. I think they are. I think that, the Saudis were very close when we left office. The Biden administration completely went in the wrong direction. They empowered Iran. They lifted sanctions on Iran. Iran doubled its GDP. You're not gonna empower Iran and expand the Abraham Accords. That makes no sense. I mean, they took the Houthis off the terrorist watch list. The Houthis began attacking ships in the Red Sea. So they made all the wrong. They sided with all the wrong players, and of course that caused the Abraham Accords to stagnate. But importantly, Mike, they didn't shatter. Notwithstanding the war, the October 7th attacks, notwithstanding all the protests and all throughout Europe, the rage in Europe and the rage on all the college campuses, throughout the United States, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, they didn't walk away from the Abraham Accords. So the Abraham Accords have stood probably the greatest stress test you could have imagined on them. So they're here to stay. I think they're here to grow. But, America has to kind of get its head back on straight and start empowering its allies and getting tough on its enemies. When we do that, the Abraham Accords will expand.
Fabulous. Last question, Gaza. After this war is over, what's the solution to the Gaza dilemma?
So, I specifically didn't speak about Gaza in my book, other than if Judea and Samaria work the way I hope, maybe that is a template for a future Gaza solution. But we're not ready for a long-term solution for Gaza yet. I mean, you can do that in Judea and Samaria, relatively stable. Gaza, it needs a short-term solution first before you can get to a long-term solution. So we got to figure out who is going to help Israel keep the peace, rebuild. Will countries accept Gazan refugees into their country? Right now, 1 million Syrians, were accepted into Arab countries as a result of the Syrian civil war. We're not seeing, that accommodation right now for the Gazan, refugees. Hopefully there'll be a place to put some of them. Hopefully there'll be an opportunity to rebuild. I'm hoping some of the Abraham Accord countries will help that out. But one thing that can't happen is Israel cannot simply create a vacuum there. It will then become refilled by terrorists. So I know they're working really hard on completing the cleanup of Gaza. Still terrorists, lurking around. Obviously, still have hostages. We don't know how many of the 101 hostages are still alive. I mean, we're praying for them every day, as I know you are, and hoping for a rescue or some solution. But it's heartbreaking for the families and those who are living there. So Gaza is still very much a work in progress. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. I mean, the one thing that I can say about Gaza, it's not dangerous. It's not as dangerous as it was on October 7th. Israel is, I think, far more secure, both in the south and in the north, than it was a year ago, and I thank God for that.
Well, I want to talk for a moment to our church pastors. We have Churches United with Israel, more than 10,000 pastors. You're involved with this. I want to encourage you to get this book for your congregation. Buy 100 copies or a couple hundred copies of this book. Why? Because this is the ground zero issue for the next 4 years. And you've got a scripture. It's called, I will bless them that bless thee and curse them that curse thee. This is ground zero. So I want to encourage you. And also, I want to encourage the Faith Initiative group that I've been part of. Take this video, post this video on your social network sites, and encourage your followers to do the same. This is very, very big. It's not just another book. It has to do with a practical solution to the problem that will bring the blessing of God upon America. And I want to say one more time to our Jerusalem Prayer Team members, I want you all to buy that. You bought 38 million copies of my books over the years. I want you to buy many copies of this book, give them to everyone you know, use them as Christmas gifts. This is really, really a big deal. It has to do with America. Listen, what Donald Trump does has to do with the American people. He needs to hear your voice. And if he hears your voice and you're solidly behind this, it's going to give him tremendous encouragement, just like that happened the 4 years that David Friedman was ambassador. So David Friedman, it's been an honor. Everyone get out and get this book, One Jewish State. Tell everyone you know. It's really a big deal. Thank you, and God bless you, Ambassador David Friedman.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it so much. And just for your listeners, One Jewish State is available everywhere, including Amazon, obviously, and elsewhere as well. And I very much appreciate your help and support, as always.